Yeah.
I know that the central figures of the Beat generation.
A little louder.
I know that the central figures of the Beat generation, Kerouac, Neil, Ginsberg, and Burroughs, were obsessed with this idea of the new vision. And I guess my question is, what is the new vision, and what was the role of women in the new vision?
Well, that's a great question. He asked, Kerouac and all of his friends in the 40s were always saying, we have to find the new vision, we have to achieve the new vision. And he asked, the questioner asked me, what was the new vision, and what was the role of women in the new vision? They got the new vision from Rimbaud. They used to read Rimbaud to each other in French mostly. And Rimbaud talks about making all things new and Christmas on earth, and basically just turning everything upside down, seeing things in a new way. What is the phrase he uses? I can't think. I'm getting old now. I can't remember things anymore. But basically, Rimbaud. There's a line in Rimbaud where he talks about just kind of breaking down everything that exists, so that you can find a new truth. Jim Morrison probably stole from that and break on through to the other side. I mean, it's the same idea. Break through what's here now to get to something that you don't know, but that you think is waiting out there somewhere. But you're right. It was mostly guys sitting around this apartment talking about it. You know, Lucian Carr and Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and later Neil Cassidy and Hal Chase and William Burroughs. They weren't really thinking about a role for women in this new vision at all. The women did not have a place in it. Women were not considered serious thinkers by a lot of these people. You know, Jack's second wife told some interesting stories to me. Joan Haverty, that was his daughter, Jan's mother, that when she was quite a thinker and an independent spirit, and when she married Jack Kerouac, he'd be in the living room, whatever, talking, having a great, deep philosophical discussion with one of his guy friends, and Joan would plop down and start to talk, and they would just say, no, wait a minute, you're just a woman, you can't talk about this stuff. Go get us some more muffins or some more coffee or something. So they didn't even think that a woman could join into that. I've criticized Kerouac myself in that I think his female characters are pretty thinly portrayed. The only really rich woman in his books is his mother, because that was the really deep relationship he had with a woman was Mimere, his mother. And in Desolation Angel, there's a beautiful portrait of Mimere. I mean, really deep and profound. But that's why women like Luann sort of got short shrift in his books. They became more caricatures than full-fledged. There's not a portrait of Luann the way there is of Neil Cassidy. So I mean, it's definitely if you look at the times too, the 40s and 50s, there was not a lot of awareness on the part of men of feminism. The whole feminist movement hadn't really started yet here in this country and so on. But it's definitely a lack in a lot of the beat writers. And there were some female beat writers like Diane DePrima who were important writers and were trying to do some work on their own and eventually did get recognition. Yeah.
What was Kerouac's rewriting process like?
Well, we have a hard time knowing. You'll get me on a subject that they probably won't want me talking about here, but I fought with Jan Kerouac's side for years before she died. She brought a lawsuit against the Kerouac estate, and 2 months ago, the final ruling in Florida, the appellate court ruled and said that will was forged, and these people, the Sampuses, have stolen the Kerouac estate. It's in the history books now, but the people that have been controlling the estate have been selling off his manuscripts privately to collectors and dealers all over the world. So none of the roles are in private hands. Okay, 10 of Kerouac's books were done on these big teletype. The first book On the Road that he did on a roll was not teletype paper. It was 20-foot sheets of Japanese art paper that he taped together and fed into his typewriter so he could type nonstop on them. It became too expensive to find Japanese art paper to tape together, so I began buying, $2 teletype rolls. It was a lot easier. But 10 of those books were on these long rolls. And, a few years ago, the Sampuses, the people that stole the estate, they sold some stuff to the New York Library, New York Public Library. And they said, well, we've sold, now what are you complaining about? We gave the Kerouac collection to the New York Public, sold it to the New York Public Library. So I called up the director of the New York Public Library, Isaac Gewirtz, and I said, can you tell me which ones of the rolls that you have, of those 10 rolls. These are 120-foot rolls. He would write a book on a 120-foot roll, typed nonstop, single space. And Isaac Ward says, well, let's see, I have 4 feet of this one and 3 feet of that one. I said, no, those aren't the rolls. What Kerouac would do, because he believed in spontaneous composition, he would get high. I mean, it could be high on pot, it could be high on listening to Bach and Charlie Parker, but he would get himself into an altered state, and then he was a fast typist, 110 words a minute. He would start going nonstop to try to get the moment when the spirit hits him. But the spirit didn't always hit right away. Like in the first 3 or 4 feet of the roll, and this isn't it. He'd tear it off and throw it behind the radiator. I met the woman that bought his house in Northport, Long Island. There was actually one of those 3-foot strips behind the radiator that he ripped off. That's not it. And he'd keep going, and in a certain spot, oh, it hit, yeah, it hits. The spirit is there. And then he would go and finish the book. Well, Gewurz has, at the New York Public Library, they have, these are the tear-offs. These are the things that, this was when it wasn't working, 3 feet, 4 feet. I said, well, which rolls do you have? I don't have any of them. So it turns out that all 10 of those books that are on rolls have been sold into private hands. And we as scholars and students cannot see them. This is a critical lapse because we do know from Jim Irsay, the owner of the Baltimore Colts, who bought Indianapolis Colts, excuse me, it used to be Baltimore, bought the On the Road manuscript, and he's shown little bits of it under glass. And you can see under when it's shown under glass that Kerouac actually would go through the roll and make pencil notations and would change things. After he did the spontaneous 120 feet, he'd go and reread it and he'd start altering it. But since we have no access to any of those rolls, we really don't know how profound those changes were. How much change. It does seem, from the little that some of us have seen of pieces of On the Road, that he did make significant changes. For example, in On the Road, the most famous lines in On the Road are, the only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who, I can't say the thing, but who burn like fabulous Roman candles.